Hello everyone, I'm Greg and welcome to our second video of how to play Memoir 44. I'm doing these videos before I play an actual playthrough so you can get a better understanding of how the game is played before I start going into it for an actual playthrough, because I may be rushing it or may not have time to explain something. So this is why I'm doing this way. So last time we were talking about armor overrun, and we will now talk about line of sight issues. So, line of sight means that one unit has to be able to see the unit in order to attack them. So, line of sight would have to go from the center of one hex to the center of the hex that you're trying to attack to. And there has to be no obstacles in between that block line of sight. So, you have this unit right here attacking this unit, and there's nothing in between center to center. That means they have line of sight, they can't attack. Now let's say this infantry unit is on the other side, this side of the forest, and these tanks want to attack them. They cannot, because there's a forest in the way which blocks line of sight. So even though they're in range, the tanks cannot see them, so they cannot attack them. The tanks would have to move over here in order to attack them. So we have center to center, and yes, there is a forest right here. However, the center of the center runs across this line that goes between the hexes. So as long as there's nothing on this side of the line as well, you have line of sight. But if there is another forest right here, you do not have line of sight, and therefore cannot attack. Another reason might be because your units are in the way, or other units are in the way. In this case, these tanks can attack these tanks, but the American tanks cannot attack the German infantry because there are two units in the way that are blocking the line of sight. They would have to move one of these two units in order to attack the infantry. The only exception to this is artillery. Artillery does not get blocked for line of sight. Artillery has an arcing trajectory, which means that they can go over top the terrain and land their shells onto the enemy. And I will show you their battle range. So they can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hexes away, and they have a battle dice of 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1. And they also ignore terrain protections. So let's say the Americans were in this forest, and artillery is trying to attack them. They have 3, 3, 2, so artillery gets 2 dice on them. Even though they're in the forest, artillery does not care. They're just going to shell it completely, so they can still roll their 2 dice and get 2 hits. I don't think there's much that stops that protects from artillery. So that is why artillery is very powerful, very long range. It's very good. Artillery is very supportive. And that is it. So we'll go over a couple other line of sight issues here. So let's say these tanks, the American tanks, are trying to attack the German tanks right here. So we have middle to middle, and I don't know if you can see it, or let me see if I can get a better description for you. So I have a pen here. I'm not going to draw on my map. I'm not one of those players that can just draw on maps, even if you're supposed to. I just cannot do it. So middle to middle means that they have a forest right here. It's the very edge of it, but it's going to block them. That means these tanks cannot attack these tanks. They have to move one step that way, or they would have to go around and go this way. Rivers do not block line of sight. Bridges do not block line of sight. They're treated as a normal hex, just ability to cross the rivers. Another type of terrain are cities. This is what one city tile looks like. And cities are very powerful and very useful. So we'll put that there. We'll put that river over there. And we'll put the forest right there. So towns and villages, or cities, they block line of sight. Unit moving in must stop. Unit moving in cannot battle except for the French resistance. And towns or villages, armor battles out at a -2 dice. And armor battles into it at a -2 dice. And then infantry battles into it at a -1 die. So this means that if infantry is right there and they move into it, they cannot battle this tank because they have moved into the city and they're not ready to attack anyone. They can, however, for the next turn, attack that unit with 3 dice, and I rolled a grenade, a tank, and a flag. So they take 2 hits, and they would have to retreat 1 away. Now, the infantry could take ground, however, they would then lose their protection from the city. Tanks, if they wanted to battle into the city, it's 3, 3, 3, so they have 3 dice, but they have a -2 die attacking into cities, so they only get to roll 1 die, and that's a miss. If the tanks are in the city, and they're trying to attack out, they still only get 1 die because of the city. So tanks and cities do not go well together. If you're trying to storm a city, it's better to use artillery that does not take that doesn't care that it's a city or not, or use infantry to get into it. Tanks are not good for cities. The only time it's good for cities is if there are objectives, which are designated by these tokens. And if you're trying to sneak one medal, which are how you win the game, we'll get that in a little bit, is if you can get in there, grab the medal, and maybe that'll win you the game. So you can do it that way. So those are towns and villages. We have hedgerows, which are these tile pieces. And as I said, they're always double-sided, every tile piece. So these are a little tricky to remember, but it's not awful. They block line of sight. Unit moving in must stop. So it's just like forests, just like cities. Unit moving in cannot battle except for the French. That's nothing new there. To enter it though, unit must start from the adjacent hex. And when exiting, unit must stop on adjacent hex. So that's the tricky part to remember, is that you have to be adjacent and remain there either if you're going into it or out of it. And the infantry battles into it at -1, tanks at a -2. So if I am this infantry unit, I can move here, but I cannot go into the hedgerows because I did not start there. But if I start here, I can move into it and no longer battle. If I don't want to move out of it, I have to move out of it 1 space. I can attack, but I can't go any further than that. Tanks as normal, get a -2 die attacking into it, but normal die attacking out of it. Cities are the only exception for the tanks on that, as far for the base game. Artillery still does not care. And then they do block line of sight. So if these tanks want to attack this infantry unit, they would have to go around them one way or another because the hedgerows do block line of sight. Those are hedgerows. Next we have hills. Hills, obviously they block line of sight, except from adjacent hills at the same height, so we'll talk about that. No movement restrictions, And terrain protection applies only against units battling from below. So if we have one unit below, they're attacking at a -1 die. So that means if we have infantry on top of this hill, these tanks, yes, there are 3 in the close assault. However, they only roll 2 dice because of the hill. They're at the bottom of the hill. But if the tanks are on equal height as the infantry, they do not get the reduction and they get the full 3 dice. Even if the hills are not adjacent. They could be one hill right here, one hill right there. They're in their range of 1, 2, 3, or 3, 3, 3. So they can roll at a normal 3 die. The same goes for infantry. There are some exceptions for the hills in terms of movement. On some scenarios, they will use the hills as cliffs, which requires a 2 movement to go on top of them, which means you would not be able to attack the rest of that turn. So just be aware of that. And then normal line of sight rules. Tanks can't attack tanks here because 1, the infantry are right there, and 2, because of the hill. They would have to move around the hill in order to attack. Those are hills. And those are the basic pieces or terrain tiles for the base game of Memoir 44. There are, however, other fixed and removable obstacles that you need to be aware of. There is wire, and there are sandbags, and these are removable pieces or obstacles. So sandbags, occupant may ignore first flag. If occupant leaves, remove sandbags. And it's a -1 for both infantry and armor attacking into it. For wire, unit moving in must stop. In wire, infantry battles out at a -1 die. Infantry may remove wire instead of battling, and armor removes wire and may still battle. Ooh, excuse me. So, what that means is if we have infantry right here for the Americans, and the Germans are going to be right here, and we have a wire piece right here. So the Americans will move 1 and still battle, so it's 3, 2, but because of the sandbags, it's a 1 die. They only get to roll 1 die, and that would be a hit, so you take 1 away. If the Americans started here, moved into the wire, they have 2 options. They can either attack the Germans, which is 3 dice, -1 for the sandbags, but minus another 1 for the wire, because it's infantry attacking out. They would still only get 1 die, even though they're at close assault. Or what they can do is, instead of battling a unit, they can remove the wire from the scenario for the rest of the game. So you have options of, so now they would be able to roll 2 dice for the next turn if they wanted to battle against the sandbags. Now let's say they rolled 2 dice and they got an infantry and a flag. So you would take 1 off for the infantry, but because of the sandbags, they can ignore the first flag. So they will remain there and not retreat. However, if 2 flags are rolled, they can ignore the first one and then retreat 1 time. Now, if they move out of these sandbags, the sandbags are now removed. And then they could take ground if they so choose. So it says you may ignore it. You don't have to ignore it, but you may ignore it. So those are removable fixed objects. And then on the back side here, we have fixed obstacles. We have bunkers and hedgehogs. Bunkers block line of sight. Infantry may move in and battle. Impassable by armor and artillery. Only protect original owner's units. Occupant may ignore first flag. And it's a -1 infantry, -2 for tanks. Hedgehogs, infantry may move in or through and battle. And passable by armor and artillery. infantry and hedgehogs may ignore first flag. So let's talk about these. So right here we would have a bunker or a pillbox, whatever you want to call it, and we will throw them the bunker right there, and we'll put our infantry, the German infantry, in there as well. I'll put those right there. Get the tanks out here as well, and we need our German hedgehog, and this is what a hedgehog will look like, and we will put that right there. Actually, we'll put it right there. So what happens means is these bunker means that infantry is a -1, so you get 3, 2, 1 die, and if it's like sandbags. If you roll flags, if they can ignore the first one, and if it's the Germans, they move into it, they can still attack, unlike forest or cities. However, let's say the Americans make entry into the bunker, they do not get their effects. It's only usable by the force who originally occupies it. In this case is the Germans. Hedgehogs means that infantry unit can move in there, and they act kind of like sandbags in terms of you can ignore one flag, but that's about it. They do not reduce dice. What's bad about hedgehogs is that armor cannot move in here, so in order to get here you have to go 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3. You cannot remove hedgehogs for any reason as well. I know I'm getting close to time here, and then armor has a -2, and the hedgehogs do not block line of sight, so these tanks could attack into here for a -2 for 1 die. So those are fixed obstacles. Hope you're enjoying this so far, and we'll talk about command cards next and anything else that we need to cover for the last video before we get into our first playthrough. Thank you.